that this is a safe range. So for
Hi, Cisco.
0.025 grams per kilo.
All right.
For
A couple of things. I'm going to make you co-host so you can actually see all the controls on our system. This also is live on the YouTube right now. So
if somebody is receiving IVIG for immunodeficiency,
so you can see that one. People will join on the site and you can see that, and then you can start admitting them.
Okay, I'm in clinic, Dr. Ladansky, so whenever they come for me to see a patient, I have to like leave for
That's fine, don't worry about it. I'm just showing you how the system works. So
Yes, sir.
Enjoy that part.
IVIG is not known until 2 to 3 months of treatment.
Okay,
So
breakout
you cannot
rooms.
decide whether IVIG works for this patient or
Yeah,
not
please chat.
without giving them sufficient
Security.
time, at least 3
Okay.
months. And every
Barely
patient
hear you.
receiving IVIG
Oh.
IVIG.
every 6 months we recommend whether the current
Hello?
dosing interval is sufficient.
I can't hear you. I just hear out of background. That's the only thing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's a lot of background.
Stable clinical improvement.
Don't worry about it.
Increase the dosing interval from 6 to 8 to 12 weeks. And if no improvement or the long-term clinical stability has achieved, you can actually discuss coming off of IVIG, and the tapering should be very slow because it can cause relapse very easily.
Okay. So we got that one.
Of IVIG on vaccination.
And the next thing we need, but look at the bottom on all the controls, because they, this is a professional term. It's slightly different than a lot of others.
Activated vaccines like influenza and local attenuated live vaccines in measles polio. The most common question we get asked in clinic is about the influenza vaccine. So how does this happen? The immunoglobulins present in IVIG bind to the antigens in the vaccines and prevent provoking the same immune response it would have done in a normal person who's not receiving IVIG. So there's definitely interference. So how do you decide that?
So how do I make breakout rooms? Do I assign manually?
Yeah, you have to download our logo.
What?
You need our logo. You need to download our logo.
Okay, 1 second.
Yes, I can send it to you.
Hello?
I can send the logo to you. Give me 1 second.
Yep.
I'm sending the logo to you right now. Okay, you should get it, Cisco now. Hey, Corey.
Hey, Chris.
How are you doing today?
Better than you.
Yeah, told me that I'm very enthusiastic about that. hard today. But it's okay. It has to be done. Mission will be successful.
I don't have an SHCI background. Do you want me to have one?
It's up to you. I can send it to you if you want.
Yeah, just send it to me. Let's do it.
Okay. Send to, okay, it should be in your Gmail.
Vamos. Oh. Am I supposed to give you a 2-line bio for the introduction?
I have your bio.
Okay, cool.
I put it.
Because Nada just sent one now.
Okay, I think you sent me email before, so I just
Okay.
use that one, to be honest with you.
Cool.
All right. Hey, Tyler. Just wait for 2 more people to show up, and I think we're good to go.
All right, so
All right. We have David joining. So actually, that's perfect. Hey, David.
I'm here.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
It's Monday paradise. I'm sorry if I sounded a little bit sarcastic, but actually, it's a good time that you joined slightly earlier because Tyler will also prepare like a short presentation, so you guys probably can exchange very quick ideas. You know how the presentation will go. I think David, your presentation will go first. Tyler's second. You do have your own slides, right?
I do, yeah. So if I'll present from here, right?
That's okay. You can. I will enable the screen sharing, so kind of get it over with.
Okay.
And that should not be a problem. I load my stuff for the introduction, and then I should unload. We'll give you, actually, Corey and our other host will give you a floor. Wait for 2 more people to join, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to very, very briefly go over our sort of layout and sort of tweak the last sort of details.
David and Tyler, nice to meet you guys. I'm excited to be moderating this this discussion. Should be a very interesting one.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Pleasure. And I think for my part, I'm hoping that David can cover a bit more of the basics of blockchain. That way my focus can be more on like location pinning, relativity, and the issues associated with that. Because I know that there are people other than myself that are very interested in using blockchain to store patient data over the course of their lifetime and you know, other things of that nature.
Yeah, I sent both of you my my phone number, by the way. So if you want to text or WhatsApp me in the midst of the presentation, if you want to just chat offline, if something goes wrong, just wanted you to have that information.
Perfect. Let me just grab this.
So my discussion of blockchain is very high level. It's not very technical, but I will describe its features, its major features.
A very quick question, David. Where did you send your phone number to? Like which email?
Sorry, Corey sent his phone number.
Oh.
He sent it to each of us.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So I have a Nadia Milkovic. Okay, bio. So we're just waiting for her and Dr. Manel. Technically, we can actually start it now. I'm kidding. We reached the critical mass to make this work. So to let you know, we have over 180 registration on the LinkedIn and something like 40 on the Zoom. And you got requests around 300 people wanted to have a copy of that. So, so we sort of process this stuff once this presentation will be over in terms of sending the stuff to other people. I also put the link on the YouTube. There's actually, you can enable this presentation to go live on the YouTube since we have, since Crown College has a bunch of the classes. We sort of give them a YouTube link so they can just like watch it without really logging in. All right, and let me see. And okay, since the time goes by, I'm just going to share this very, very briefly with you guys. All right, so this is our layout. Okay, so it would be good to have Nada joining us, but I guess, Corey, you will be the moderator number one. So this is the PDF, everything scripted. Then we, I guess I'm going to do the presentation of both of the moderators. If Dr. Kamps will come online, he will present both. Thank you to both institutions. Then the core, you practically read this part, okay? And then Nada can introduce both speakers. If we have a glitch, just let me know and I will just take over to sort of, so we don't have a deafening silence for any amount of time or longer.
Chris, where is this? I don't know that I
have.
Oh,
I'm so sorry. Stop share. Let me just do it again.
Make sure it's sent off.
Okay, you should see now. It's like a PDF document.
What's it called?
Oh, I just share my screen with you guys.
No, but if you want me to read that, don't I need a copy of it?
Yes, it was sent to you last night.
Oh, so I'm looking at what you sent me, and I see a PDF conference speaker materials. Is that it?
Yeah, you can go to the conference speaker material. There is something called the blocking scheme.
Ah, got it.
And then this is pretty much what I'm reproducing right now.
Yep, I see it. Sorry about that. I'm on it.
No, that's a problem.
And then I made sure to tell Nadia that whenever she is happy to hop on, just to quickly hop on.
That's true. Okay, I'm going to.
There we go. There she is.
And David, how do I pronounce your last name?
Capsule.
Capsule. Okay. And Tyler Janes, I have that correct?
Yeah, Janes.
Got it. And David, just to clarify, capsule? Capsule.
Capsule.
Okay, got it.
I think you're muted, Chris.
Sorry. Hey, Nada, this is Chris.
Hi, Chris. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. It's Nada Milkovic, a good pronunciation?
That's right.
I used to be, well, it's kind of not very close, but I used to work in Croatia for some time.
Oh, nice.
So,
in Zagreb?
actually, more in the Vukovar, northern part.
Oh, nice. Oh, well, it's nice to meet you all.
Mhm.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, let's just go over. So we have two speakers, David Kospal and Tyler. Both of them have slides ready. David will present first and he will present himself. Tyler will present second. Then we have two moderators, Corey and Nada. Let me show you, again, I'm going to go over the same sort of document that I was showing to other people, because Nada and Corey, you guys need to decide which one is the number one, which is number two. Okay, this is in your attached sort of materials.
Yes.
So I just need to know who wants to be number one, who wants to be number two, because when we those meetings, we sort of we kind of cut down on the creativity, at least on the beginning. So
I've been practicing at least for the last 6 minutes, moderator one. So if it's all the same to you, Nada.
That's fine.
Okay, perfect. If there's, as I said, if there's any problem, wave, do whatever, and I will step in. This is being recorded via stream on the YouTube. Actually, it's not yet, but it will be. Also, there's a part when we go through the layout, when we should have a breakout rooms. What I would suggest when we sort of, and this is after you guys, both Nada and Corey will have a question to the speakers, just ask me if you want to do the breakout room. Sometimes it makes sense to do the breakout room. Sometimes it does not make sense to breakout room. So just ask me, Chris, do you think we should go to the breakout room? I will sort of see if it makes sense to divide the people. If it doesn't, just keep asking the question. Either way, we're done at 3:30. Okay, without the breakout room. Please do not worry too much about what you're going to say. This is supposed to be a fun. We not like once the presentation is done. This is a sort of free floating discussion. Because sometimes my computer has a seizures. What I'm going to do, I'm going to actually share my. I'm going to share my. What's the name? Administrative privilege with Corey. So he's going to be co-host. So if something goes down, Corey, you will keep the link open. Everything is recorded automatically in the web, so you don't need to worry about that part. Hi, Manel, how are you doing?
Oh, so Chris, I need the speaker number one and the speaker bios. Do you have that?
Yes. So there's.
Should have been sent last night, right?
Yes, I did send it last night, but
I'll find it.
The worst case scenario, I can literally just let me just save as copy. Actually, no, we can just print it.
And do you want the moderators just to take a second to introduce themselves and their background?
So what happened is we introduced the speakers. So what happened, me and Dr. Manel, this is how it goes. Now we're finishing the synchronization. Then Corey, in that case, will open the session. I will project the slides. We usually give the people 2-3 minutes to go in. Then Corey will ask me and Dr. Camps to sort of, actually in my case, will ask to take over. I will have a 3 liners above both of you. Dr. Camps then will say, official thank you for both institutions and enjoy. Then it goes back to Corey. Okay. The most important part is just explaining how the things will work, and all this part is on the slide. Corey, you do not need to worry about the slide. And then you, Nada, you're doing pretty much introduction of the speakers. Do you have materials, or do you want me still to send it to you?
Please send them to me.
Okay, all right.
Chris, what do you mean you're not worried about the slide? You want me to read those 5 things out, no?
Yes, you do, but you don't need to switch. I will project the slides. Okay,
got it.
So as you talk, everything will go like this. So I do the whole presentation, unless the system will crash, but you have everything in front of you.
Okay.
And then pretty much Dr. Kospel does his presentation, then Tyler does his presentation. And then after that, you guys have free with the speakers. Whatever you want to ask, please ask. Then around 3 o'clock, 2:55, just ask me, should we go to the breakout room? I may say yes, I may say no, depends how many people is there. And in any case, if I say no, you guys continue chatting with the speakers. If I say yes, I will pull the people in the breakout rooms, and then they will come back. You don't need to worry about the breakout rooms.
I have a hard stop at 3 because I've got to get to a class that I have to teach.
Okay, then we finish at 3:15. Then that makes the sort of one thing slightly easier. And then again, we finish this again. Corey, you are sort of in charge of that. Okay. Any questions? So after 3 o'clock, we'll play a little bit by the ears, but we've done this before. It's not going to be a new thing.
How are we fielding questions? Is there going to be someone that's sending them to me and Nada, or is that just us to decide as we vet?
You can decide. Corey, I have your WhatsApp. I don't have Nada's WhatsApp. I can just send it to you, or you can just watch the chat. If
it might not be bad for you to feed me and Nada questions. That way, like, we don't speak over each other, and we know, like, you'll be like, next question, this, and then you'll text her and say, or just create a chat with the three of us, and just address each question to one of us so that we know what's going on.
Okay. So Nada, I'm sending you right now, save PDF. Okay. I'm sending you right now PDF, which has all the of course, my system just decided not to do this, what I wanted. It will have all the copies of the speaker bios. Just make the thing slightly bigger. PDF. Documents, conference, desktop.
And then shall we start the slides now, since it's top of the hour?
Yes, I just kind of trying to send the things to Nada to kind of have this over. Yes, we should start really soon. Okay. SHCI date, short reference chart. Okay, Nada, you should have a slides right now in your email. Give me 1 microsecond. Okay, so just go to I believe the slide number 4 and 3 and enlarge them. All right. Okay, done. All right, let me just load my slides. Done. Stop share. All right. Well, this. All right, 6 people. Stop share.
Oh, I see.
Okay, yeah, just make it bigger.
Yeah, I have this also. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. All right. Here. All right, so let me just move the control over. Okay. All right, we're going to admit people. And Corey, you good?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Should I start admitting people?
Yeah, I just admitted everybody. All right, Corey, go ahead.
Okay. Well, welcome. My name is Corey Feldman, and I'm excited to host David Kepsel and Tyler Janes at the annual conference organized jointly by SHCI and USCS, entitled Innovation Frontiers 2021. Today, we will focus on blockchain and quantum technology. First, I have the honor and privilege of introducing Dr. Chris Madansky, the president of SHCI, and Dr. Manel Camps, a provost of Crown College, University of California, Santa Cruz.
Thank you very much, Corey. So actually, I do have a privilege to introduce two fantastic moderators. We have Nada Milikovic, who works at the University of South California. He is a faculty member out there. She's known for being She's known for being a speaker for the numerous programs. She also developed a series of the classes about the entrepreneurships, and she teaches about the empowerment and solving wicked problems the world is facing today. I would say that's very, very on time, because we do have a wicked times these days. She's also an activist. This is the term that I learned today, activist for social justice and environment and community leader in the Santa Cruz County. So Nada, thank you very much for being here. I think we need more people like you who can actually make a difference. The next person is my dear friend, Corey Feldman. Corey is famous for many reasons. First of all, we met together during the program at University of Pennsylvania, and he's one of the founders of the Society for Healthcare Innovation. Corey is entrepreneur, is well known in the entrepreneurial world. He also served and is still in active service in the Israel Defense Forces. And he is the person who knows how to provide a value proposition for practically any startup. Saying all of this above, I will hand this over to Dr. Camps to introduce our organizations.
Thank you, Chris. Well, I'd like to really thank the Society for Healthcare Innovations. They have this wonderful format to address really important issues of technology at the interface between technology and society. And I'd like to thank the organization that I'm a provost of. It's Crown College at UCSC. Crown is one of the 10 colleges at UCSC, and it specializes on the study of the impact of technology in society. I'd like to especially thank two organizations within Crown. One of them is Caveat, the Center for Applied Ethics of Emerging Technologies, and also Get Virtual, which is the organization that Nada is heading. UCSC also has the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurial Development that's related to Crown as well. So I hope you enjoy this session and enjoy.
Great. So let's go over the plan and flow of the conference. So shortly, both presenters will present sequential presentations. There's not going to be a break between them, so we're going to go back to back. And then after the presentations, we'll have a 15-minute moderator-driven Q&A session, but definitely feel free to put questions in the chat box. We're going to use the questions that were submitted during the registration, as well as those that get posted into the channel. And in the off chance that I have any good questions that come to mind, I might use one of those as well. And then after 20 minutes, we're going to go into breakout rooms. We'll come back to the main room, discuss some of the potential questions that came up, and the questions will close after 20 to 30 minutes. So just a couple quick rules. Number one, of course, post questions or comments in the chat, which will be monitored throughout this discussion. Mute your audio when you're not speaking. Position your camera properly. Minimize visual distractions. I think everyone is kind of aware of these. And just follow the guidelines as they're listed here. Note that all of the conference sessions are recorded, and selected portions will be available to the public after the conference. And then full recording will be available to SHCI members. Nada, I'll kick it to you.
Thank you. I would like to introduce our speakers for today. Their full bios are available in conference website. Here are a few highlights. David Capsell is an entrepreneur, author, philosopher, attorney, and educator whose recent research focuses on the nexus of science, technology, ethics, and public policy. He has provided commentary regarding ethics, society, religion, and technology on MSNBC, Fox News Channel, The Guardian, The Washington Post, NPR Radio, Radio Free Europe, Air America, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and the Associated Press, among others. He has been a tenured associate professor of philosophy at the Delft University of Technology, Faculty of Technology Policy and Management in the Netherlands, visiting professor at UNAM, Instituto de Filosóficas, and the Unidad Postgrado, Mexico, Director of Research and Strategic Initiatives at Comisión Nacional de Bioética in Mexico, and Assessor Director at UAM Xochimilco. He is currently a lecturer at Texas A&M in philosophy. Our next speaker is Tyler L. Janes. Tyler is a non-traditional bioethicist concluding his master's level education with the Alden March Bioethics Institute at Albany Medical College, and is currently engaged in addressing the social concerns that surround emerging technologies in medicine and other industries. Beyond his numerous international presentations on topics ranging from artificial intelligence to theoretical nanotechnology, he is actively contributing to international research on AI ethics through his engagement with the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers and publications in several journals in the medical and engineering industries. And there you have it. Please welcome our first speaker, Dr. David Capsule.
Thank you so much.
You can put your slides on. Also, for everybody, this is being broadcast live on the YouTube. You can go to our LinkedIn website and share the link. Dr. Capsule, the floor is yours.
Yes, I'm going to try to grab the PowerPoint here. Let's see if this works. All right. Apparently, I need to, no, this is an Apple computer, so now I need the granted authorizations. So.
Well, it's always this interesting pull between the Apple privacy and the Apple elegance that I never could understand. And I always have a fight between the Android and Apple.
I'm going to, hold on. So I haven't shared from this yet. Okay, I think I have to do it to Zoom. There we go. It's going to quit and reopen Zoom if I do this.
You can give us a little bit more time, I guess, to adjust.
I'm sorry about this. It's going to drop me off and then I'll be back, I guess. I'm sorry about this.
No problem.
Well, you'll note that I gave Nada all the tough names to pronounce. I think you did a fantastic job. I have no idea how you pronounced half of those, but very impressive.
There we go. It appears to be working. I didn't have to quit. All right. Are you able to see that? Is everybody able to see my slides?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So I'm very grateful to be able to talk to this group today a bit about blockchain, and I'm using an example that something I've been working with for about 15 years, and that turned into a product that we built a company around. But to introduce some concepts in healthcare and blockchain in general, specifically from our personal and corporate experiences with it. In about 2016, there was a lot of talk about how to be able to leverage blockchain technologies in healthcare to be able to provide specific types of control and monitoring of the use of data, and it's never been more relevant than now. Let me walk you a little bit through the issues involved. So the Human Genome Project, which is finally 20 years after it was completed really this time, mapped out the human genome. And there was a race that started really during that project to start to own portions of the genome because Celera Corporation realized that part of their, that was the Venture operation, involved in the private arm of the Human Genome Project, realized that they could get some value proposition off of patenting genes as they found them. So that started a process that continued for quite a long time. And already in 1999, there was some outcry about the patenting that was going on of parts of the human genome. And it wasn't really considered to be a proper area for patent, but there was no legal challenge yet. Around that time, a very important gene patent was filed on the BRCA1 and 2 mutations, which were then used by Myriad Corporation to monopolize the testing of breast and ovarian cancer genes, because they were able to use the same reasoning that Celera had used to get patents on these genes. And the claims in the genes or the claims in the patents were on isolated genes, unmodified genes. The only modification was that they were isolated, and that was the claim. So this is not entirely unprecedented. There was a case in 1980 that upheld the notion of being able to patent new life forms. So in the Diamond versus Chakrabarty case, a life form that was engineered through directed evolution to be able to digest petroleum products was patented, so that wasn't an issue. And a very old case involving a patent on adrenaline, which had been extracted from glands and purified, was upheld. So there was really no issue about patenting modified parts of nature or isolated parts of nature, but genes posed an interesting new problem. And for about 20 years, those patents, including Myriad's patents on BRCA1 and 2, let them monopolize the testing, because in order to test, you had to reproduce. So the nature of PCR is that you're reproducing the gene, and you couldn't do that if the gene was patented. So that was sort of a leverage point for them. It earned Myriad billions of dollars to be able to control all the testing for those gene mutations. In 2009, the ACLU and the Association for Molecular Pathology sued Myriad. This was 19 years into the patent, so the patent was about to expire. It also happened to be the year that my book, Who Owns You, came out. So that was a happy coincidence on my part, because all of the arguments that the ACLU and Myriad raised in their lawsuit were arguments I made in my book. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know they were going to sue, so that was interesting. And in 2013, that lawsuit had made its way all the way up to the US Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, there's a unanimous decision. They said, no, you can't get patents on unmodified parts of nature. And so it was a real landmark holding, and it changed the whole landscape. Now, that was a big sort of introduction to the question of, now what do we do? And that's where blockchain comes in. So how do we guard genetic privacy? How do we give people rights to things like data? How do we enable them to be in charge of their data, to be custodians of their data? And how do we enable some sort of exchange of important scientific medical data, and give people credit and hopefully payment? Well, that's where blockchain starts to come in. So let me go back a couple of millennia though, because there's a mechanism that underlies blockchain that is ancient, and that is the technology of ledger keeping. So ledgers are an ancient technology. The Sumerians invented them. As far as we know, they were the first. There may have been others. But what you see here in this slide is a ledger. And of course, the very first writing system in the West seems to have come from ledger keeping as well. And these ledgers basically kept track of debts, and it was the first form of banking and for enabling the Sumerian system of and tracking goods. Farm goods were an important part of their economy, and they were using ledgers to track them, who had committed how many crops to the city-state, and et cetera, who was owed what debts. Well, blockchains are simply an extension of that technology. They are ledgers, and they are immutable, and they are distributed, and they are cryptographically protected. So someone in a blockchain is, if they're part of the network, they're engaged in a couple of things at once. One is they're verifying entries in the ledger. So computer time is gifted essentially to the network to ensure that new entries are proper entries. Now, because there's no central system, everybody who's a node in that network is engaging in that process. And the way it's done to prevent anybody from being able to send incorrect records to the ledger is through various forms of cryptography that you don't need to really know much about in order to understand that it's decentralized. Unlike your Excel spreadsheet, it's like sharing the entry capability for an Excel spreadsheet across a network, and making sure that a majority of the network approves of each entry before it's entered into the immutable ledger. So that's as deep as I'm going to get into blockchain right now, but later we can take some questions about it. And so the Bitcoin blockchain is the most famous one. It's arguably the oldest, although there was probably one that existed in newspapers before this. But it is the oldest digital blockchain. And if you look at the entries in the blockchain, in the Bitcoin ledger, they are simply entries that indicate who mined a Bitcoin, and then where those Bitcoins go. It's just tracking the flow of the currency. It's a sort of meta ledger because it's a ledger about itself. Because all of the entries are also parts of the network. So there's some privacy afforded through blockchains. Unless somebody knows who owns a particular wallet address on a blockchain, all we know is that wallet has some amount of value or some other asset tied to it, and then where it goes. But it's also transparent, so blockchains afford us transparency. You can browse the Bitcoin ledger, you can browse the Ethereum ledger, and see all of the transactions that go on it. All those ledger entries are public, so we know about the transfers and transactions that are happening. And then you also have blockchains give you a certain amount of control. So if you have a wallet, which indicates ownership of some part of the blockchain, then you control it, and nobody else can control that because you have a private key that prevents others from controlling it. And if you lose that key, that value or that asset is lost permanently, and that's why there's millions of dollars of Bitcoin out there that will never be retrieved because lots of people have lost their wallets or their private keys. So the Bitcoin blockchain is a history of every transaction made in Bitcoin, but we don't know who those owners are unless somehow they publicize their wallet address. So given a permanent, immutable, distributed, searchable, encrypted ledger, what we can do in health records and health data, like genetic data, is store, distribute, search that data, transact against that data, provide transparency and audit trails for that data, while preserving anonymity and privacy. So for instance, with genetic data, again, unless you provide some sort of identifying data, we can't really identify you based upon just the genomic data. So you've heard of breaches of genetic testing and other databases, but where it becomes identifiable is where people provide other identifiable data. And also, so as I said before, you have through the wallet address some indication, some indicia of ownership and control, and we can do that with health records. And there's a number of companies that are working on that with other sorts of health records. And we're doing that with genomics at EncryptGen. So our product, for instance, the gene chain, allows you to label the data, identify it with a unique ledger entry, transact that data, even get paid for that transaction on the blockchain. And all of those records become immutably stored, recorded, and an audit trail for any misuse of the data. So you can do this with, as I say, any sort of medical data. With genetic data, it's a little easier because there's a number of privacy protections around medical data that prevent it from being put on blockchains because you can't usually delete stuff on blockchains. De-identified genomic data is given a broad exception for research and science, so it's a lot safer to use on blockchains right now. But other companies are working on using other health data and blockchains together to do similar things. So the same technology that is at the helped launch Western civilization, writing, and culture in many ways. Ledger technology has a number of different uses in science in general, but also in healthcare for being able to provide people with some way to control and audit the use of data, to share it widely while remaining de-identified, and to settle transactions for that data as well. We're really just getting started to see how those uses are going to be used or put to use in different types of data. So I'm going to stop here and ask if there's any questions about the general technology, because I know I didn't get into it in depth, but also the uses and maybe you want to ask a little bit about what we do too. So thank you. I'm going to stop sharing.
Great, thank you so much. And folks, please feel free to pop your questions into the chat. And we can field those. But David, in the interim, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about what it is you do presently and that table of interesting folks.
Yeah, so those were the team at EncryptGen, and we started the world's first blockchain-mediated genomic data free market. And we started that it launched in 2018. There's 7,000 users on the system right now, and several thousand of them have uploaded genomic data from direct-to-consumer tests like 23andMe and Ancestry. And they set a price, and they can do business directly with scientists who want to use that data and transact that data peer-to-peer. Right now, the genomic data market is monopolized by companies like 23andMe and Ancestry. And the best estimates are that that's a marketplace that does hundreds of millions of dollars worth of business each year, buying and selling people's genomic data from those direct-to-consumer companies to pharmaceutical companies, but we don't really know to whom because there's no transparency. So our intent is to do what a lot of these companies do, disrupt the nature of that marketplace, make it peer-to-peer, bring individuals into the process, and enable the science and disable a lot of the monopoly.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Capsell. That was a very inspiring presentation. We're going to move our discussion on to the next speaker. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tyler James.
Hi, thank you guys for having me. I know that this was a very last minute thing, so I'm just glad to be able to present after David and hear his remarks on what's going on presently in the field. So my approach here is just going to be more on chatting about what is happening in regards to efforts to standardize maybe virtual reality, augmented reality, how they might be interplayed into the medical field, and of course the impacts that would have on every one of us in our daily lives. So we can move on to the next slide for a quick little disclaimer, because I am serving as the chair of the Nanotechnology Council Standards Committee for the IEEE. I am also serving as the secretary for, I think the correct name of it is the Extended Reality. Yeah, it's an initiative on extended reality for industry connections within the IEEE, where they are, again, developing white papers, project authorization requests to develop standards for how we want to regulate augmented reality, extended reality, virtual reality. And of course, all the remarks I'm making today are just for myself. They aren't linked to the IEEE. They aren't linked to the Aldermarch Bioethics Institute at Albany Medical College. So again, just a little disclaimer there. So we can move on to the next one. So when we talk about reality, and especially when we're talking about blockchain, we're talking about virtual property in a more general sense. We have to realize that cyberspace realistically is only constrained by the devices and memories that we present to it, not by how we define it semantically or in lexicography. So we can give a definition for what augmented reality is. We can give a definition for what blockchain is. We can give a definition for what virtual property rights are. But until we can link that to physical spaces, to the areas that we environ, they're not very tangible. They're not very manageable, I guess you could say. And I mean, hear from this quote from Schopenhauer, sorry. Been a long morning. Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world. And that is very true to how we engage currently with our digital technologies, with blockchain, with EFTs. We take these things to be real without giving them an actual dimension to exist in. And to that extent, we take augmented reality and extended reality, which is abbreviated here as XR, because that's what's being common for those who aren't in the wheelhouse there. But those are just mobile applications of the virtual reality software. So we get the Oculus Rift, we get science fiction coming out with these devices where you are completely immersed, your body's laying on a bed and your brain's basically making your avatar move as if it was your actual body. AR and XR are basically the mobile versions of that, where we can basically say in this, qubit of space, as it were, we have an advertisement for Google. In this qubit of space, we have an advertisement for Myriad. In this qubit of space, we have a virtual avatar, which is admitting you into a hospital space or running you through the pre-diagnostic screening questions, sort of thing. And obviously, for law and medicine, defining what these are is going to be key in having us engage with these technologies a lot more, especially if we want to link patient data to blockchain systems, show from birth to death their entire medical history, which physicians they have seen, how the diagnosis has changed over time, how their diagnosis might be linked to other related diagnoses, that sort of information. we are going to have to find a way to engage in these spaces, these virtual spaces that are really linked to our physical spaces in a better way than we have been to point today. Let's go to the next slide, if you would. And this brings me back to the question of geography and relativity. Again, as the quote here says, a map has no vocabulary, no lexicon of precise meanings. It communicates in lines, hues, tones, coded symbols, and empty spaces, much like music. Nor does a map have its own voice. It is many-tongued, a course reciting centuries of accumulated knowledge in echo chants. A map provides no answers. It only suggests where to look. And very much like that, AR, XR, objects, tokens, whatever we define it as, these chains, they only exist in an aether that is powered by technology, by the silicon processors in our computers, in the data farms that exist internationally across borders. And, even if we were to say, make a virtual mask of the entire world and be able to concisely pinpoint where, our titles and deeds for property are, where people are in, second to second moments of their day, however we might want to apply blockchain, NFTs, and other technologies into, again, connecting them to real world spaces, connecting them to maybe tailor them so that certain advertisements are only visible for certain people. There's a generic advertisement for a soda brand, and for one person it might show Dr. Pepper, another person might show Pepsi, another person it might not even be for a carbonated beverage, it might be for tea or coffee. There are these very generic things that as we integrate augmented reality and extended reality technologies into our bodies, into our prostheses, they are going to become a lot more relevant. And we're going to have to really question, who owns these spaces? How do we define ownership over these spaces? And, obviously blockchain can be a vital tool to help us understand these things. But again, if we're going to be tagging them with specific locations, if we're going to be tagging them with specific geography, that's going to get a lot more complicated as we go beyond our own stratosphere and into space. Because obviously, if we try to do the same things that we've done here on the moon or on Mars, where, we have geographic regions that are vaguely understood by general population, a lot more better understood by astrophysicists and people who actually do the studies of these fields. There's going to be a lot more involved with that, and we're going to have to be aware of how relativity in these spaces impacts that. If you would, to the next one. So here is where we get into the mixing of measurements, and something that I have been focused on very heavily in recent months, because even if we give dimensions, whether that be volume, whether that be weight, to these tokens, to these items, they are not interchangeable with the measurements that we have in the physical world. And what I mean by that is specifically that an image like we're seeing here on our screen that is defined by picas or by pixels or by the metadata that is backing it, giving us information on the specific colors, what specific image and the URL that is linked to. There's all these things that are integrated into that, which don't have any real meaning in the physical world because it's a different medium altogether. And as we saw with the issues with the Mac earlier, there's also issues of software rendering language, file types, and any potential advances that we might have in new information types and new information formats. Like, say, for instance, if we were to create a new information type specifically derived from our neurons in the brain, that is going to be a completely new medium that we have not had to experience or define before this point, because, you know, there are maybe some things that are interoperable with the images and sounds that are present in our cortex, that are present on computer systems, but there are other things like, you know, tactile sensation, olfactory response that are not expressed and will have to be defined. And, you know, the ones and zeros in the computer are going to have to reconcile with how to accurately represent that. And again, this is all still very emerging technology, very, you know, oh, sorry, the slide's gone backwards one. Yeah, sorry. Slides are jumping all over the place, but I'll move on to the security concerns as well, because, you know, this is also related. Because if we want to talk about securing our data, securing our information, we're going to have to understand how we balance our individual freedoms and rights with the need to authenticate our identities. So as part of that chain in the process of developing a new block on the blockchain, obviously, for as much as we might want to be anonymous, for as much as we would want to have our data constrained so that it can't be traced back to us, you know, we're going to have to balance between our own freedoms and the need to ensure that we have a variable chain that is accurate and representative of the entire history of ownership. Obviously, there's also the issue of information control in a world where our reputation is established by the perception of others. So even if we might say something is defamatory, you know, that is from our perspective. That is not from the perspective of those around us. And we're going to have to reconcile how to balance these things, which in an age of social media, not really something that we've had to come to terms with, for many people at least. And of course, you know, managing how advancing AI is going to complicate the issues of the creation of digital twins and deepfakes, and, you know, how we're going to ensure that we are talking to a human when we're sitting across from another individual, and how we define that from maybe a cybernetic individual or a artificial intelligence. Let's move on to the next one here. And, you know, just in conclusion, obviously, the big items here that we want to ensure we do, because it is still a developing and emerging technology, is that we want to be engaged. We want to ask questions, and maybe if you're in a position, seek consultation for those issues that might stymie you, or maybe even your patients, when it comes to how these things are being applied, how things are being interoperable. Add your voice if you have the space to, because regulation and standardization doesn't happen without some driving force behind it. And of course, accept the change as it comes, because these technologies are still in their very early days, and honestly will only change at a more rapid pace than we have seen with any other technology to date, because we have the resources, we have the creativity. We just need to figure out how these meld together in a way that is best for us and our society and, you know, our culture moving forward. And I think that pretty much wraps up the general comments I wanted to bring up. Because again, the idea here for me was to try to present some more broad terms, long terms perspective on, you know, how we're going to be applying these technologies.
Great. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for that informative presentation. Before we move into the breakouts, I think Nada and I have compiled a couple questions of our own and from the chat. And so my first one would be for David. And, you know, just so you can understand the level at which I'm coming from when I ask this question, when I think about blockchain as it relates to cryptocurrency, for instance, a transaction is occurring. Let's say I'm buying X units of Ripple, and the network of nodes is confirming that, in fact, I'm transferring the money in and that XRP is coming to me, right? And so the verification piece here is to verify that transaction. When you think about genetic data, what exactly is being verified when we talk about kind of uploading it to a blockchain?
So a couple of things. Nobody is putting genomic data on blockchains directly, and likely they never will if they want to be able to do business under various privacy regimes, because it's potentially identifying medical data, and under laws in California and other places, and in Europe, anybody's got the right to be able to delete their data, and blockchains are not good at letting you delete stuff. Now, what the blockchains are doing for genomic blockchains and other medical record blockchains is confirming the identity of the wallet holder compared to the uploaded data. So the purpose there is to ensure something like ownership. It's not really ownership because you can't own data, but it is indicating something like a title to the data, and then enabling you to track the transactions. So another good thing blockchains are good at is keeping records of transactions, so we can get a full audit trail of the transactions for that data, see where it's gone, who paid how much for it, and also in cases like ours, to get you paid for those transactions. So that's what those blockchains are doing.
So in essence, the blockchain becomes the key that unlocks the confidential health data, but that data is not actually uploaded to the blockchain.
Yeah, some people had originally thought they would, and you could design, and there are people designing mechanisms to use something like IPFS, which is an interplanetary file system that's built on Ethereum, to distribute the data, and other in some sort of encrypted and secure fashion. And other ideas are to keep it in place and to allow something like zero knowledge proofs and other mechanisms to be able to interrogate the data without it leaving. But there's a number of reasons why all of those are likely to have problems.
Great, thank you.
So I'm going to ask you another question, David, to follow up with what Corey just asked you, and to continue what you were saying. We have here the UCSC, we have the Center for Genomic Studies, directed by David Hausler, who has been using some type of platform where scientists can upload data, and similarly to blockchain, their accreditation is always a part of that data. So if another scientist uses their data, it will automatically give them citations in that study for whatever they're using. Do you see this type of work allowing for collaboration across the world, across these kinds of academic boundaries that have been created with this technology?
Yeah, it's essentially the same sort of technology, and the difference is that it's distributed. So there's no central repository. There's a more secure form of storing the records of those transactions. But moreover, we think that a party that is being left out of all of this is the person who donated the data to begin with. So because there's no legal schema for somebody to own their data, we have, the very public case of Henrietta Lacks, who was only recently acknowledged for her contributions to science, and died in poverty, even though her data and her cells generated maybe $1 billion worth of wealth or more. So we think this is a critical step that can be resolved by using a blockchain, by making you the wallet holder basically for all your medical data, including your genome, and making sure that the value as well as the credit flows into your wallet.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead. Chris?
I just have a crazy question then. If you own this data and you die, is that a part of your inheritance for the children in that case? Like in the case of the Henrietta, and there's a two reasons I'm putting this question up there. First, obviously I have to remake my will, if that's the case. The second thing is, now we're going to wrap around 3 o'clock because I know you have to go, David, so we will not have a breakout session. But should I redo my will?
No, actually, as I said, nobody owns data. There's no legal scheme under which you can own data. The closest we get is intellectual property law, which allows you to monopolize the use of data, the reproduction of expressions that are original expressions. But your genetic data, even you don't own it. Nobody owns it. This was why I introduced the Myriad case, because that is what established that, even your isolated genomic data is not ownable. So what we can do is use technology to try to provide some clear and verified link to you, between you and your data. But you would need a regulatory framework for owning data in order to worry about who's going to get your genomic data when you die. And there is no such framework right now.
I would like to follow up with a question for Tyler. Tyler, you talked about NFTs. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. And do you see patients themselves becoming NFTs?
So the issue with non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, as again that acronym defines, and as David was saying, is that obviously we want to try to secure that there is a single instantiation, or at least a unique instantiation of a digital token, or what have you. Now, how effective that has been is debatable, because you have people who are taking screenshots of an NFT and then, may or may not define that this is a screenshot of an NFT of, however many far back that train goes. So I don't see us making patients NFTs, as it were, specifically. Again, there might be a way for us to directly chain their medical information to the unique patient across borders, across hospital systems. But the NFT system is way too fragile and way too new for us to be able to engage with it effectively as medical personnel, I think.
So a follow up, and this can go to David or Tyler, or perhaps both of you. In the short term, which I guess I would define in this space as the next, let's say, 3 years or so, is there an ability for this technology to move us away from the reliance on these disparate systems in healthcare that don't speak to each other, i.e. the EHRs? Is there a world in which this becomes the avenue for a patient to take their business wherever they want to go, regardless of their existing connections to a specific provider on a specific EHR? Perhaps David first, and then Tyler.
Yeah, that's certainly something a lot of companies are working towards. But of course, interoperability means also abandoning a fair amount of intellectual property. So I think that organizations like the IEEE have to create standards that then become generally accepted, frameworks for companies, to have to basically do business using, in order to empower individuals towards that sort of future. Otherwise, we're going to have a continued balkanization of the various standards that are being used right now. You have a patchwork of different formats and very little interoperability. And you need, and this is one of those instances where you have to have some sort of body, institution that gives us a top-down standard to fit into. And then companies might be able to do that and would be sort of nudged in that direction.
Yeah, and I would have to agree with David there because it's going to be difficult for the US to engage in that practice. It'll be a lot easier for Japan, for England, for other universal healthcare systems to engage in that practice because there's a lot less, I should say, competition involved between the health systems because it is national. You know, it is all engaged back to the national system. For us, and again, this comes back to an issue with what standardization is. We have to tread a very careful line between current patents, current trademarks, and obviously the rights of publications. And, you know, we have to understand that once something becomes standardized, it is seen as a general practice in the field. So obviously, again, anything that relates to patent law, patent policies, ownership of that information, that all goes out the window because it's now public information. And again, I don't see us resolving that in the foreseeable future because there's going to have to be first a decent framework that allows us to move forward from these, you know, pre-internet age standards, pre-internet age frameworks, and move us towards a more future-focused system.
I'd like to follow up with the question that was asked in our pre-meeting survey, which talks to this. Should blockchain be managed by a centralized entity similar to the Social Security Network Administration that we have here at the US?
No.
No, it kind of goes against blockchain, huh?
Yeah, you can't centralize a fundamentally decentralized project. You shouldn't.
Yeah, you can try, but at the end of the day, it's going to fail to try to have a centralized entity administering these things. I mean, obviously, you can try to have disparate organizations try to contribute to it, but again, it's always going to be an issue of who has central authority, who has central control. And when you're trying to decentralize things, it's a very conflicting avenue.
I think Chris had a question.
Yeah, so I'm kind of wondering because, you know, when we have a human genome project that, you know, the scientific data produced for that were a common sort of good, right? Now we're talking about the monetization of, you know, singular genes, which, you know, yes, Marietta was a singular or one of the few cases in the ocean of the humanity that could potentially enormously benefit. But I sort of wonder that in all our discussion about, you know, monetization, we sort of don't lose the bigger picture. We need a large data to find the genomic, you know, interaction and interference. And maybe this data should be public. You know, in some countries, you know, the body belongs to the state. So maybe the genome should belong to the state. Just kind of throwing this out there.
I'll hop on that first, and then David can respond if he wants to after that. That is a very interesting notion, is probably a notion that I myself would want to advocate for, obviously, if we're going to try to make information public. But we run into issues of what privacy is, what security is, what identifiable information is. And we have different perspectives on what each of these are semantically in lexicography. So I think first we have to address how we define these very disparate ideas and what we want to protect more. Is it going to be individual freedoms? Is it going to be, you know, the individual ability to express themselves as a unique entity within a system? Or is it going to be a more social good for us just to say, you know, anything goes, which is going to be a more difficult situation, especially as we run into, say, fundamentalist religious groups who hold that, you know, say personal thoughts, as it were, in Islam are between you and Allah alone. But again, it's going to be difficult to balance these things.
So it's naive to think that the fruits of open research don't become privatized for profits, which they do all the time. the difference with genetic research is you need somebody to pay for the sequencing, which is expensive still. And it's certainly, there are some states where the states themselves have gone ahead and done genome sequencing for the whole population. I think Iceland is an example. But then they privatized that database and sold it, and they're making a lot of money with that data. So I think that, we can recognize that genomic data and other sorts of scientific data should be widely available for basic science, but that people should be, first of all, that they need to be incentivized to get their data out there. And they're not going to do it for the fun of it, especially where it's potentially stigmatizing in the case of genomic data, which it could be. So yeah, I think that you need to have systems like a marketplace in order to drive the incentives, and then also to recognize people's rights and needs for proper remuneration for valuable data. That's my own perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So 2 more questions for you, David, before you have to hop. One is, do you have competitors? And if you do, what are the differentiators? And the second is, Nada referred to scientists who are uploading data who are kind of permanently affixed to that for purposes of attribution. And I wondered if there was a way to use blockchain to permanently affix the genetic or medical signature of an individual to that individual without the ability to deassemble it, if you think that is possible or viable.
So that's something that is possible and viable, and that we're looking into, and others are looking into. Your DNA as personal identifier would be a very strong personal identifier in a world of increasingly vulnerable personal identifiers. To answer the first question, there's other people who are taking different approaches to genomic data and blockchains. 2 of our main competitors are Nebula Genomics, which was founded by George Church, and Luna DNA, which was founded by some people who left Illumina a couple of years ago. But each of those approaches are slightly different. Nebula Genomics is now selling whole genome sequencing and a subscription service to their product. So that I think they've moved towards the sequencing component as their major product. And Luna DNA has a public benefit corporation in which you get shares when you upload your data. But you don't get paid according to the value of your particular data. Everybody takes the same amount of the shares, which is something like 21 cents per share. So those are different approaches. In our case, our marketplace, we take a 10% commission off all transactions and let you set the price, and you use free market forces to determine what the going rate might be. And we don't sell anything. We just operate a marketplace. So we have we're very different mode of operating.
We're going to slowly wrap it up. Nada or Corey, last questions.
I guess I had a question about the use of how much energy this technology uses, and do either of you see any innovations in the future that will allow for better energy use with blockchain?
So there's no doubt that the 2 biggest blockchain networks, Ethereum and Bitcoin, use a tremendous amount of energy, and it's a big concern for a lot of us. We use a blockchain that's very cost efficient and energy efficient. It's called multi-chain. It's a permission blockchain system, and it's not a mining algorithm. So you get all the energy use with these mining algorithms. And there are alternatives. So Ethereum is supposed to go to proof of stake. So it's not going to be proof of work. That should cut energy costs for Ethereum. Bitcoin is probably doomed to remain proof of work because it's the core algorithm is such. But there are ways to bring down the costs, including the Lightning Network as a layer on it that enables transactions without the mining. So I run a Lightning node on a Raspberry Pi for a couple of cents a month, and it's a full node of the Bitcoin network, but it's able to transact through the Lightning Network instantaneously and with very low power usage. So I think if more people adopt things like that, then we can keep the energy usage of Bitcoin lower.
Yeah. And I was recently listening into a discussion that they were having from the New York Times on this topic. And obviously the opinions differ. Any energy usage for blockchain that might be considered wasteful because obviously you're having to do these calculations, you're having to do this mining, are for the benefit of humanity. There's also opinions that it is to the detriment of humanity. But at the end of the day, we have to remember we go to sleep with our television sets on or our computer systems on all the time. And there is a lot of energy waste that we produce, even in developed countries, because it's not going to benefit us. So there's going to have to be widespread changes to how we approach energy usage, energy efficiency that go beyond just making things renewable. Because it's a very interlocked system. And again, even if we're talking about power distribution and we're talking about what's waste, what's not waste, at the end of the day, we're going to have to resolve our infrastructure issues and our, again, notions of what is proper energy usage before we're able to really hammer down on these broader issues, in my view.
Well, thank you very much. I think that slowly wraps up our conversation today. I think we learned, at least I learned from almost knowing little about the blockchain to now being left with even more questions. I would like to thank you, David and Tyler, for awesome presentation, in-depth thoughts. Corey and Nada, outstanding questions and very nice guidance for the difficult process. And Provost Camps, thank you very much for co-host this with me. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you so much.